Slavery had been a part of society since the dawn of civilization. The Egyptians did it, the Greeks did it, the Romans did it, the Arabs did it, the Chinese did it, the Aztecs did it, and even some African kingdoms did it. By the age of exploration, demand for slaves increased, but by the 19th century, it began to plummet. You see, European powers needed workers, so they freed slaves so they could work in industrial factories because, Industrial Revolution and all that. But in the United States, slaves were still used to harvest cotton, which was used to make textiles and clothing. By the mid 19th century, the North saw the atrocities done by Southerners to slaves and tried to abolish it. However, the Southern states threatened that if they were to abolish slavery, the South would secede. In the Bill of Rights, it states that states could do whatever they wanted if it doesn't break the law of the Constitution. So, in theory, states were allowed to secede. By 1820, there were 22 states, 11 free states and 11 slave states. Perfectly balanced. But then, Missouri happened, and it decided to be a slave state. Oh, crap, we need a new state to balance it out. What are you doing? Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? Please, stop, please, stop! So Maine was added to the Union, and there were now 12 free states and 12 slave states. The states also declared the Missouri Compromise. A line would be drawn west of Missouri, and each state north of that line would be free states, and everything south would be slave states. This went on for another 20 years. Arkansas and Michigan joined the Union in 1836 and 1837, respectively. Meanwhile, in the North American desert, a group of Anglo-Mexicans were declaring independence from the Republic of Mexico. By 1836, the states of Texas and Alta California declared its independence from Mexico. Texas would gain its independence by April of that year and form the Republic of Texas. 9 years later, Texas joined the Union. This sparked the Mexican-American War, which only lasted 2 years. And now, the map looks like this. Texas and California became states, but that's when the problems began. Texas became a slave state, but California didn't divide itself and became a free state. So the states met up to discuss again. In 1850, there was the Fugitive Slave Act, an act that allowed the return of slaves who escaped to the North to be sent back to their masters. You see, ever since the founding of the nation, slaves have been escaping their masters through the Underground Railroad, a series of tunnels and houses that lead to the North and later up to Canada. 4 years later, there was the Kansas-Nebraska Act, allowing the people to vote on whether or not a state can be free or not. Kansas would end up becoming a free state, but only after 5 years of violence in what would be known as Bleeding Kansas, led under John Brown. As for Nebraska, it wouldn't join until the mid-1860s. By the late 1850s, there were 18 free states and 15 slave states, making the balance pretty one-sided. Things got worse when a former Whig of the new Republican Party was running for President of the United States. This man was Abraham Lincoln, a public abolitionist. The South didn't approve of this and tried to rig the vote by having his name not show up in any Southern ballot. But despite their efforts, Lincoln won the election, and the South was not happy about that. So by late December 1860, South Carolina declared its independence from the Union. 6 other states would secede by the new year. The states of South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, and Florida founded the nation of the Confederate States of America. In response, the Union asked for troops across the country in every state to take down this rebellion. This caused Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas to secede and join the Confederacy. Later, on April 12th, 1861, Confederate troops bombed Fort Sumter, starting the American Civil War. Here's Washington, and here's Richmond, only a 100-mile distance. So the Union decided to invade the Confederates directly to their capital. But that became difficult once they reached the city of Manassas on July 30th. After a short skirmish, the Union had to retreat. Things were different out west, however. Unlike the failure at Manassas, General Ulysses S. Grant was able to push into Tennessee. They advanced south, only to be ambushed by the Confederates at Shiloh in April of 1862. Though it was a bloody struggle, the Union won the battle. Back in the east, McClellan tried to invade Virginia via Fort Monroe, only to be stopped at Yorktown. But despite having 5 times more troops than the Confederates, McClellan decided to lay siege, fearing that the Confederates had more. The Confederates would retreat in May of 1862. It wasn't an, oh, we're gonna die kind of retreat. It was more of a, reinforcements are in Richmond. Let's just regroup and set our defenses there. So, with the help of Robert E. Lee, when the Union soldiers were outside of Richmond, the Confederates kicked them out. At this point, Lincoln would send another general, John Pope, to invade Richmond. But even with this new general, the Confederates won at none other than Manassas by late August 1862. Confident from their second victory at Manassas, the Confederates began their invasion of the Union. If they were able to defeat the Union in Confederate territory, how hard is it to do it in theirs? Meanwhile, the Confederates under Generals Braxton Bragg and Edmund Smith continued their invasion into Kentucky. But things went south, literally, when the Confederates crossed the Potomac. Lee entered Maryland by the 3rd of September 1862 with 55,000 soldiers. And over the coming days, they thought they had this in the bag. But little did they know, General McClellan and his 87,000 troops were marching towards Lee. A few days before, Corporal Barton Mitchell and First Sergeant John Bloss had found a copy of Lee's battle plans wrapped around cigars. This is great. We now know where the Confederates are going to. What do we do now? Hold on. I'm thinking. I really think we should do something immediately before something unfortunate happens. Hold on. I'm thinking. I really think we should do something. We can't. It's dark out. We should probably set up camp. But you just spent a whole day planning this. Whatever. Hopefully you can think of something tomorrow. Maybe. You thought of something yet? Yeah, I have. Took you long enough. McClellan, I just got news that Lee had already split up his army into separate portions. Excuse me for a sec. After Thomas Jackson's capture at Harper's Ferry and McClellan's assault at the Blue Ridge and South Mountains on September 17th, 1862, the regrouped Confederate force met up with McClellan at Sharpsburg for the Battle of Antietam. It was a bitter victory for the Union. 23,000 troops from both sides would die. Lincoln was starting to get enough of McClellan. His poor coordination in Antietam, as well as his refusal to continue chasing Lee into Virginia in October, caused Lincoln to remove him from office and replace him with General Ambrose Burnside. This would not be the last time we see McClellan, but for now, his story is not important. As for the Confederate invasion of Kentucky, the Confederates had initial success. They would capture cities like Munfordville and Bardstown. By October 4th, Richard Hawes became the governor of Confederate Kentucky. Also, have you ever wondered why in the Stars and Bars there were 13 stars instead of 11? Well, those two stars were supposed to represent Missouri and Kentucky, who were more sympathetic to the Confederates than Delaware and Maryland. But their downfall came in the Battle of Corinth, where they were pushed back into Tennessee. As for Mississippi, Grant and Sherman arrived in Vicksburg, and other Union soldiers arrived in Port Hudson. Everyone knew that if Vicksburg fell, then it would only be downhill for the Confederacy. But although the Confederacy isn't doing too well in the West, Richmond had been perfectly protected from the North. But now General Burnside has invaded Virginia, and he's arriving at Fredericksburg.